Well, this week on Old News, a rich and or famous person exploiting the less privileged and trying to wait it out for the public to forget. And there you have it, the clash of entitlement and law. Naomi Campbell, this is your tape stroke YouTube video. We're going to be reading through the findings of an official inquiry that led to dismissing and deleting Naomi Campbell's not-for-profit organization, Fashion for Relief, that she founded and was a trustee of. The commission said its investigation into Fashion for Relief would examine whether those controlling the charity, quote, have properly exercised their legal duties and responsibilities under charity law, end quote. Misusing charity funds is a disgusting, God-smiting act, and that is why we have gathered here today. First and foremost, this episode was prompted by one of the best things that ever happened to like-minded millennials, a podcast about 90s pop culture, Beyond the Blinds. They don't need my endorsement, but just in case you're not subscribed, be sure to do so. You can listen on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, etc. About a month-ish ago, Troy and Kelly of Beyond the Blinds brought up Naomi Campbell's scandal and her most recent scandal around Fashion for Relief. Whilst I was familiar with Miss Ma'am being friends with Puffy and appearing on Epstein's list and pleading guilty to assaults, plural, I just did not expect her to be misusing charity funds, and yet the moment I've heard, I knew she was going to tell us it was not her fault.
I've just found out today about the findings, and I'm extremely concerned, and we are investigating on our side. As I was not in control of my charity, I put the control in the hands of a legal lawyer, and so we are investigating to find out what and how, as everything I do and every penny I ever raise goes towards charities.
But we will not let her pretty little lies fool us, saying that she's a face of the charity, but someone else was in charge. Your Honor, nah. Naomi Campbell founded that charity and was a trustee of that charity, which she was in charge. But before I start chasing those threads, where are my manners? Hiya, good people. Welcome back to my little fashion corner. We've got a very long video ahead of ourselves, and I truly hope you are looking for something to listen to in the background whilst you tidy or go for a walk. Good job tidying and or going for a walk. And I'm going to jump right back in what exactly transpired a month-ish ago and what are we able to read about it on Ed Snowden's internet. The inquiry was in the UK, as it was Fashion for Relief's home country, although they did operate in other countries. None of what I'm going to be saying is tax, legal, or fashion advice. Articles and the media stating facts used in this video are going to be linked down below if you want to go and read through it. And all opinions are my own. Well, I'm going to put on my best reading voice, my best reading over enunciating voice, and we're going to get back into it. I'm not going to start by introducing Naomi Campbell. I don't think that's necessary, but here are some reference photos just in case you have a more of a visual memory and are bad with names. In 2005, Campbell started Fashion for Relief to raise funds for children living in poverty and adversity around the world. Since then, Fashion for Relief organized fundraising shows to help a variety of humanitarian crises, such as victims of Katrina, 2008 terrorist attacks in Mumbai, 2011 earthquake in Japan, and more. On 19th January 2012, Fashion for Relief was granted a not-for-profit status in the UK. Not-for-profits and charities, I'm going to be used that term interchangeably. Not-for-profit status is or was beneficial to both the organization and Naomi Campbell herself. There's the eligibility to apply for government funds, grants, funds from private foundations that wouldn't be available to for-profit organizations. Non-profits can raise funds through events and donations, and the term usually comes with a certain degree of credibility or public trust that an individual or a for-profit organization wouldn't necessarily be able to enjoy. Amplified reputation definitely comes with it to the organization, but also trustees themselves. Trustees also have limited personal liability, which is not a get out of jail card. Just saying, it comes relevant later maybe. And with this trust and status often comes community and support of the general public with similar beliefs, and therefore hopefully more donations. One of the major, if not the major, benefits for such organizations is that they can apply for tax exemption, tax exempt status. In the US, the federal tax exemption under 501c3, and in the UK, it's charitable status, and it means that they don't pay income tax on donations and other revenue directly related to organizations' not-for-profit activities. Should not-for-profit own any real estate or operate in community centers or schools, there might be even eligibility for property tax exemption. Lots happening in the paperwork area. On the other hand, to donors, many countries allow donors to deduct their contributions to not-for-profits from their income tax return filing for the sake of encouraging more giving. So how did we make it to 2nd September 2020 when the Charity Commission, or simply the Commission, opened a proactive compliance visit and inspection case, a CVI? Well, let's talk paperwork chat. Pull up your chair or adjust your earbuds. An article published 26 November 2021 on civilsociety.co.uk notes that the charity has filed its account late 4 times and its annual return and accounts were 179 days overdue. This is also then reflected in the inquiry, by the way. A tax year in the UK runs from 6th April to 5th April. However, not-for-profits are required to submit their paperwork within 10 months of the end of their financial year, which is, in my personal and somewhat professional opinion, quite benevolent time frame to get your ducks in order. I can speculate, and I think media did speculate, that the Commission had concerns over consistent late filings and potentially conflict of interests, and potentially be concerned if the trustees were having any problems, as the Commission has a general oversight. It sort of acts as a regulator, but also a supporter. Jumping slightly ahead, the announcement of statutory inquiry opening is still available on UK's government's website. It covers the timeline. It is linked down below if you prefer reading through it, in peace without Linda. This CVI case, Compliance Visit and Inspection, was concluded in September 2020, and they identified and expressed more concerns on top of those late filings. The content of filings wasn't satisfactory. The Commission mentions late filings and also unmanaged conflict of interest, which sounds small, but it's actually a massive red flag. Published 25th November 2021 by the Charity Commission. In March 2021, the Commission issued the trustees with an action plan aimed at improving the charity's financial management. Following a review of the charity response to the action plan, the regulator identified further concerns in the charity's financial management and governance to explore. The Commission decided to open an official inquiry, which sounds inquisitive because it is. What we are going to learn is that the organization Fashion for Relief wasn't exactly forthcoming and proactively trying to mitigate any risks or further remises, as they didn't really respond in time, which is not great. The authorities really don't like to be ignored, intentionally or not. The Commission also tells them what inconsistencies they found and what they will be examining in that inquiry. Whether those in control of the charity have properly exercised their legal duties and responsibilities under charity law, the financial management of the charity, including payments made to a trustee for services provided to the charity and the level of charitable expenditure, the governance and management of the charity by the trustees, including the failure to file statutory returns on time, and whether there has been a misconduct or mismanagement by those in control of the charity. Not only are these regulations well defined in UK's charity law, but we now have access to the Commission's findings as we're in 31st October 2024, and we don't need to speculate. It's funny how time works. It's all wibbly wobbly. Also, I should have said that earlier, because government understands that trustees aren't necessarily lawyers or skilled to read such documents if they want to work for a not-for-profit organization. They provide a lot of support in terms of managing the administration, how to set up one, how to run one, how to apply for grants, how to get more support from government. There's quite a lot available on their website. Guidance for trustees, a part of it, essentially outlines what is involved in the role of a trustee and what responsibilities are derived from the charity law. I know this is a lot of admin to go through, but it all matters. Like the case building and context, it really does matter. Back to the inquiry now. Point of the agenda number 1. Whether those in control of the charity have properly exercised their legal duties and responsibilities under charity law. The Commission says that trustees failed to comply in full with the action plan issued in March, which including certain actions for the trustees to take within a specific period of time and by no later than 9th September 2021. They were given 6 months to execute those actions and they failed to do so within that time frame, which was not a great start, arguably. The trustees only responded to the action plan after being prompted to do so by the Commission, with a limited response provided on 20th September. This response indicated partial compliance by the trustees with the action plan. So what I'm reading is that not only they responded late, but their response was crap. Great start. On 18th November 2021, the trustees resolved to dissolve the charity upon the conclusion of the inquiry. So they again got together and they said, look, the Commission concluded things are bad. It's post-pandemic. Let's just close up the shop. Let's draw up the papers. I mean, commitment. We love to see it. The Commission stated that given this decision, the trustees won't have time to address the outstanding issues, especially since it wasn't operating during the events of global epidemic of COVID-19. What the Commission specifies is that this decision of the trustees did not displace their failure to fully comply with the action plan within the specific timeframes. This failure was mismanagement in the administration of the charity by the trustees. Meaning, it's not the pandemic's fault that you can't take action and do better. It's because of you, dear trustees, have been consistently mismanaging this charity.
I was not in control of my charity.
The Commission holds all trustees liable. It's your fault, not epidemics or everyone else's fault. It also concludes on, I'm going to be saying conclude a lot. Get used to it. It also concludes on failure to comply with the charity's constitution. What is charity's constitution? It is a legal document that sets out rules, describes purpose of that not-for-profit organization and its structure. It is a governing document, a rulebook, mandatory part of the submitting documents when you're registering with the Commission, and it ensures compliance with UK's charity law. And just to demonstrate how seriously Naomi Campbell and other trustees took this organization, the inquiry found that prior to March 2021, when the action plan was issued, so since January 2012, since that not-for-profit status, to March 2021, there were no formal meeting minutes recorded. And then there was one formal meeting record. So over the time, we're not saying that they haven't met or spoken to each other, but they kept no records.
And we are investigating on our side.
Between 5th of April 2016 and 31st July 2022, Fashion for Relief reported a total income of almost £4.8 million. I mean, if I were the one rounding up, I'd say 5 mil, but we're being nice apparently. £4.8 million sterling of total income, and trustees were keeping mental notes or passing paper notes and burning them after reading.
Hello? Did anybody lose their secret CIA shit? I don't think so.
By the way, shout out to Burn After Reading. What a fabulously stupid movie. Now, fun fact, in 2019, they reported an income lower about 70,000 than their expenditure. Their income was almost 1.72 million and they expended 1,795,000. But do not worry, 5.5 thousand of that expenditure was on grants. 5,000 of almost 1.8 million pounds sterling. It's insane, but luckily we're just getting started. It's only downhill. Speaking of income, we made it to point 2. The financial management of charity, including payments made to trustees and the level of charitable expenditure. So we're slowly learning that things were abhorrent in the name of paperwork, and the Commission also concludes low level of charitable expenditure. And I'll try not to scream in the void, but it's really difficult. Fashion for Relief was most active from 2015 to 2020. Then the world wasn't really open for business, so no argument there. Just reiterate, between 5th of April 2016 and 31st July 2022, Fashion for Relief reported a total income of almost £4.8 million sterling and expended almost £4.6 million. The Commission asked the trustees to provide a detailed breakdown of the proportion of the charity's income spent on charitable activities, fundraising, and or governance. The outline breakdown of cost notes 10% of overall expenditure was awarded to charitable grants, less than £390 sterling, across 5 financial years. That is less than 80,000 per year. It's about 2 times of average UK salary, if I'm not mistaken, annual salary. The complete breakdown of their expenditure is governance and operations 18%, event charges 72%, and grants awarded 10%. But those are roundups. If you actually do the maths, £389,173 sterling allocated to grants out of £4,579,272 sterling of total expenditure is approximately 8.5%. 8.5%. The trustees' defense is quite interesting. In the Daily Mail article published 29th May 2021, Bianca Helmich, side note, she was a Fashion for Relief trustee. She also got banned. I'm gonna go ahead and speculate that she was Naomi's buddy, but I don't want to dive too much into her because she literally sits in a spider web of shell companies. But Miss Bianca gave a statement, quote, "Donations do not always come through us, and this is not reflected in the accounts every time. We prefer not to handle donations for various reasons, including tax purposes and legal setup." I can't with this bitch. I mean, Miss Ma'am, if your intention is to facilitate connections between donors and charities, you didn't need to file for not-for-profit status. I mean, I'm sure there's an app for that. We're gonna talk about this lady. I see that Writing Linda didn't know how much in detail yet. There might be a part 2 when we talk about Bianca Helmich or Bianca Tobinska, whatever she currently prefers, and Veronica Chow, the other 2 trustees that got banned as an outcome of this inquiry. But that's a different rabbit hole. Charity law doesn't dictate how much you can spend on the actual fundraisings. However, pursuing good practice and charity law, trustees must keep fundraising methods and activities under review and be satisfied that such activities are in their charity's best interest. I think it's commonly understood that fundraising events should raise funds. I can understand there were concerns if Fashion for Relief throws a lavish event, has almost £1 million sterling coming in every year, but then awards 80,000 of that money on average. 80,000, that's a lot of money, do not get me wrong. I should hope they did a lot of good if and when they were awarded, but in the context of how much was coming in, it just does not add up. The Commission provides more detail in the next part, the charity expenditure. For example, let's talk about the now infamous flight on 11th May 2018 from London to Nice in France to transport art and jewellery for Fashion for Relief's fundraising event in Cannes. Now that's a 2-hour non-stop flight for which trustees expended €14,800, which is about £12,000 sterling or $16,000 depending on financial world crises at the time. And after consulting the interwebs, a mid-sized private jet hire would probably correlate that price tag. On board was a trustee. It is widely believed it was Naomi Campbell, but I was not there. I cannot confirm that. One major donor that is unnamed, and art and jewelry in excess of €1.5 million. And look, I understand that you don't necessarily want to take that on a commercial plane or drive that with that, but here is where those meeting minutes would come extremely useful, and the Commission also concludes so. So Fashion for Relief said that this was provided and organized by the family office of a donor, presumably the one on board, and included a discount. They provided no evidence to show what kind of discount, they just said they had no paperwork. They also said that Trustee B got a second quote from a different company, but again, no paperwork. And even if I wanted to give her the benefit of a doubt, which I don't, even if it was a phone call, it is good practice to put that in writing. Send an email to another trustee or to the entire board, whoever is helping to organize that event, and say, ask company X for a quote. It's more or less the same money. Let's go with the donor's friends plane. At least we know what we can count on, and they already gave us a discount. Also, we should get some paperwork from them, XOXO, Bianca. Sorted. How does this correlate with the Commission's guidance for trustees? Well, not very much, no. The trustees were unable to evidence their decision making and how incurring this expenditure was reasonable, appropriate, and in the charity's best interest. The Commission is basically saying, we get that costs vary, but you have no actual documentation regarding any decision making in your most active 5 years whatsoever. So we cannot give you any grace and just trust you, bro. Now, I do exaggerate. I don't think the Commission would really say whatsoever. There's more to this trip. Hotel expenses. €9,400 or some over 10,000 US dollars to cover Naomi's 3 nights at a hotel, apparently. Really? So Campbell got a firm to secure her travel arrangement, and then the firm invoiced Fashion for Relief and they paid it. To mention this is why semantics matter, because it all falls into this whole spider web. She uses this to fit her narrative. Okay, might have never received a payment for her involvement. However, she had her expenses covered and it was way beyond just her not invoicing it directly. Again, this all is authorized by the trustees. What is the decision-making process here? It's not her fault that firm found this expensive junior suite accommodation at a 5-star hotel. As the invoice shows, did Miss Campbell ask for something cheaper? Did she say, no, this sounds inappropriate? This is a lot of money for my not-for-profit organization to pay on my behalf. I'm going to cover half these costs or find more suitable alternatives that don't seem exploitative. To me, this seems like living an extremely comfortable, if not luxurious lifestyle and staying ignorant to whatever can tarnish the idea of a perfect life. So far, we've been learning that trustees of a not-for-profit organization are in charge of decision-making on behalf of their patrons and donors and must always choose in the organization's best interest.
As I was not in control of my charity.
So how exactly can Naomi Campbell claim she was not in charge? Also, the Commission asked what was the reasoning behind that, as accommodation for the charity's other trustees and volunteers on this trip was significantly less costly. They mostly asked, we want to hear you out, just show us how you went about it. Responses were, the hotel gave us a better price on their suite, Campbell had to stay there so that she could mingle with other guests of the event, of the gala, for the greater good, of course. It was not to advance her personal benefits. And they were very happy with the travel company because they got them good prices. Lastly, the trustees stated that they were satisfied that value for money comparison exercise was always undertaken when booking hotels, and the travel company they used always found the best prices and deals available. No records were provided by the trustees to evidence this value for money comparison exercise, and that's it. How could all this possibly be their fault?
As I was not in control of my charity.
Just to make extra sure this all flew, trustees said these hotel costs were usually covered by a donor of the charity, remains unnamed. The Commission stated that during the inquiry they couldn't find such payment or corresponding credits from said donor. They kindly reminded trustees that if a donation was made to the charity, it could only be used on activities which further its charitable purposes. I'm sensing they're trying to say that Naomi Campbell's good sleep is not in their charity's best interest, but I could be wrong. And then there is the issue of covering Campbell's security detail with Fashion for Relief's money, which they accepted as arguable, as in you could make an argument for it, but I'll say absolutely not on this one. If a famous person requires personal security detail, it's definitely not an activity to expense to further charitable purposes. Also, who asks a not-for-profit organization to cover, well, all this, but also the security detail? Like, extremely charitable of you, Miss Campbell. This concluded the trustees have failed to show how these were cost-effective and appropriate use of the charity's resources. The inquiry found this to have been misconduct and or mismanagement by the charity trustees. Another detail of the second point, financial controls and management. In this part, the Commission debated a number of payments for consultancy and PR services, which is where Ms. Helmich-Dobinska and Ms. Chow come in play. Mostly Ms. Helmich because it seems that she had her fingers in the setup. The Guardian, UK's media outlet and the first news house to report on this, published in their article. Regulatory concerns involving Fashion for Relief include payments of £77,000 sterling in consultancy fees and £15,942 in travel expenses in 2018 to 2019 to one of its trustees, Bianca Helmich. The previous year, the charity spent $107,000 on trustees' fees and $23,000 on expenses. Helmich is a partner at the law firm QCL Associates, specializing in providing advice to high net worth private clowns, such as Madonna. Alright, who had Madonna on their bingo card? The firm's website describes her as a devoted philanthropist, a trustee of Fashion for Relief, and a supporter of the Mayor's Trust for London. Just a note from current Linda, I don't think she features their website anymore. I think they've moved her into another company that is somehow related to QCL Associates, but I might be wrong. Again, this is the spiderweb of companies and just the absolute mess. So I see that Writing Linda didn't know how much down this rabbit hole to go now, because there's one big mess hiding behind two surnames. But I just want to say many refer to her as a lawyer, but I only found her studied at a business school and then worked at law firms that were full service law firms, which often includes business consultancy, tax departments, etc. And in many of these, you don't have to be a lawyer to work there. Guardian refers to her as being more of a financial advisor rather than a lawyer, but the Commission's findings state that she has some legal qualification, but is not acting as a legal advisor in the United Kingdom, which is making my head hurt, but I think I'm going to start using them. I'm not acting as a fashion advisor in the UK, or Australia for that matter. And just to go back to that quote I read, it seems the invoicing year, what was invoiced by Ms. Helmich/Tobinska, was reflecting a calendar year, but for the sake of an argument, 2019, this lady was happily invoicing over 90,000 to this charity for her great ability to raise enough funds to give away 5,000 or 5.5 thousand pounds. Like, what kind of maths did she learn at her business school? Moving on. On 8th November 2021, the inquiry exercised the Commission's powers to protect the charity's known assets cash balance from being applied without its prior consent. These orders were revoked on 25th March 2022 and 27th April 2022, following the appointment of the interim managers. So they said no spending until we can assess the situation, and also you don't seem like trustworthy people, so we've commissioned this advisor, a lawyer, two lawyers actually, who will help us put things together. So you just sit down. And to end this quote, further information is provided in relation to this under the Regulatory Action Taken section of this report. The Commission concluded the trustees, how dare drag them into this mess? I mean, honestly.
I was not in control of my charity.
The trustees failed to manage the money well, if at all. They failed to make sure that they had enough money, to the extent of the interim manager then having to phone and email around and try to recover money to repay owed money. Yes, owed money, and fulfill previously made pledges. Stay hydrated, people. So the Commission says, you made bad decisions and we'd like to see why is that. The trustees confirmed that such exercises, value for money exercise, had not been undertaken, and that the speed with which such services were required was a factor in their decision-making. This has been confirmed in writing to the inquiry, but not documented at the time by the trustees. Now, so they were not taking notes because they were just too busy. This is how every company I've worked for works. It's fine. It's totally fine. They were just too busy to worry about frivolous things such as keeping accounts and records and how they manage other people's money in their fundraising organization. They had a bigger purpose. They took over from Nokia and they were connecting people. A diabolical sentence appeared in the last paragraph. The inquiry found that the charity's trustees did not manage the charity's finances as they were legally required.
I was not in control of my charity.
You know, things are bad when there's an entire write-up about the bank account. I get gradually more angry as I read all the figures, so I'll try to stay calm, but I went to get a lozenge and I couldn't find any, and I knocked over everything, so hopefully everything works still. The bank account. The bank account wasn't handled by the trustees, but by a third party, regulated professional advisors, solicitors and accountants, and I speculate this was the company Miss Helmich Tubinska was a partner in. The commission says there are additional to a charity's funds if they are held and under control of a third party. Consequently, in such situations, a charity's trustee need to ensure that such transactions are sufficiently scrutinized to ensure that their charity's funds are being used solely on activities which further the charity's purposes and can be accounted for. It's fine, what could possibly go wrong here, right? And honestly, this is probably why Naomi Campbell believes that it's not her fault, because she told people to do stuff. So here goes her responsibility. When the interim manager was doing all that pesky accounting for funds, they identified 2 payments slightly over 50,000 and one just over 4,000 pounds sterling that were misapplied and per request recovered. It's not like you have a legal obligation to make reasonable effort, return money that you receive in error. You could be charged with dishonestly retaining a wrongful credit. What even is 50,000 in this world? The trustees were asked to provide detail on a number of payments and transactions, but given that they probably burnt all those past meeting notes, the trustees had no other option and blamed the company that they themselves appointed and asked to make payments upon their requests and authorization. The inquiry questions the trustees about a number of these historic transactions, and they confirmed that they were unable to recall what these specific transactions related to. The trustees confirmed that they held no written records to show how transactions were approved by the firm on behalf of the charity. They added that if such records ever existed, or if they still exist, owing to the elapsed time, they would be held by the firm. Trustees also said no money owed. The commission concluded trustees failed their duties because they didn't have sufficient oversight, they were not appropriately involved, and they were not confirming or challenging payments made on behalf of their organization. The inquiry found this to be misconduct and or mismanagement by the charity's trustees.
And I'm extremely concerned.
A significant part of point 2 makes section payments to trustees and section trustee expenses. We kind of sort of touched on this, but there's just so much fuckery around. It makes me disgusted. Here we go. So trustee A, which is Naomi Campbell, and her Cannes 2018 hotel nonsense. Great. On top of that 9.5 thousand hotel charge, over 6.6 thousand pounds sterling, almost 8,000 euro of additional charges that were paid for by the charity. These costs included spa treatments, room surveys, and purchases of cigarettes and hotel products. Has she just got no shame? They go on and elaborate that a trustee is entitled to be reimbursed for reasonable expenses. They, in fact, don't believe all these were to be reasonable. Reasonable expenses is a phrase the Commission likes a lot. The inquiry got a hold of a copy of invoice for those hotel costs and found these costs were charged between 15th May and 25th May 2018, dates after the gala that was held on 13th May. The inquiry found that the trustees breached their legal duties both to comply with the charity's constitution and their duty of prudence in respect of these payments, which constitutes misconduct and or mismanagement in the charity's administration by the trustees. So you may have gathered the inquiry has certain powers, one of them being information gathering, and they used it to obtain information missing, for better or worse. So what transpired here? They got a copy of that invoice, seeing 2 nights were aligned with the date of the gala, and the remaining 4 were other engagements. Again, the trustees said that the hotel costs were normally covered by that donor friend who totally exists. Trustees also submitted a copy of an email from 27th July 2023 from that travel company saying, I can confirm that the hotel rate obtained for Fashion for Relief during the Cannes event had 20% discount to standard hotel rates at this period. The commission was quite rightfully unhappy with an email sent 5 years later with no evidence or further information of other options in comparison to this hotel to somehow substantiate this choice. Additional costs, spa, CEs, all that whatnot, of almost €8,000 were also paid for and then invoiced by the same travel company. Just to come full circle, no corresponding payments or credits from that donors that trustees keep bringing into this. I wonder if they're still friends. The concluding paragraph says, quote, Trustee A and B told the inquiry that it was their firm recollection that the costs of this trip, which did not relate to the charity's events, were met by the donor. However, they were unable to produce any material to support this assertion. The inquiry found that the trustees failed to provide any evidence in regard to how certain expenditure incurred by the charity was part of the 2018 Cannes event and was cost-effective and an appropriate use of the charity's resources. The inquiry finds the above failures to be evidence of mismanagement and or misconduct in the administration of the charity by the trustees. Now this is 5,000 words, and I feel like if you're still listening, you're fighting some demons, just like I do. Last thing before we move on to point number 3 is payment to trustees. The worst part of the expenses paid to or on behalf of the trustees. There is no way how to make this a short story, and I also think that the full context of this really shows how rotten these people are. So I'm going to just read this and everyone just drink some chamomile tea. This mostly revolves around Trustee A, I believe that's Naomi, and Trustee B, I believe that's Bianca. Here we go. It is said Bianca received close to £300,000 sterling between 2018 and 2020. Handsome 150,000 a year average. In consultancy fees, not including all the expenses they claimed, Bianca later outlined that for that period of time, the average annual travel reimbursements would come up to £26,000. The trustees said this was agreed in 2015 when the charity was set up. Ms. Helmich-Tobinska will receive an annual payment for her consultancy services and 10% commission of all sponsorship received. Remember when we read that statement from her saying they don't like to deal with all the donations and rather facilitate connections? The inquiry found Trustee B outlined that her fees reflected the fact that she had spent a considerable time working for the charity, spent a significant time traveling, and was the primary individual dealing with all the negotiations. End quote. 150,000 annual salary, almost 30,000 travel expenses for this role, and just find that one of those years the charity was actually losing money, which technically is not making a profit, but the income was significant, which is what counts. Why do I even talk about the fees? People should be compensated for their hard work, right? Yes. Not only this should have been stipulated in the charity's constitution, which it wasn't, but the commission would most likely have to approve of this. The basic principle is that trustees should act in the charity's best interest without seeking financial gain. There are strict legal guidelines that must be followed if trustees want to be paid for their services. Reasonable expenses are okay, but that's not meant to be compensation for their role as a trustee. You can travel and raise awareness and secure partnerships and sponsorships, but your accommodation and travels are not the reason traveling. Also, you should not be paid for your time doing this, is how I interpret it. They can be also compensated if they provide services beyond their trustees' duties. However, this needs to be specified in the charity's constitution, which is then reviewed by the commission when the organization is set up, and trustees might even need to seek the commission's approval of such agreement to provide a certain type of service. Last but not least, the sponsorship commission. Also, how arrogant. A 10% commission fee on all sponsorships brought in, not just those that you bring in. That's some sales job. Receiving a commission fee could be seen as conflict of interests because it creates the incentive for personal gain rather than, let's go back to that basic principle, acting in the charity's best interest without seeking financial gain. In most cases, if trustees wish to be compensated in this way, they would need to ensure transparency, disclose the arrangement to the other trustee, and seek approval from the Charity Commission to stay compliant with the charity law and protect the not-for-profit's reputation. Furthermore, I love that word, by the way, Trustee B is mentioned to, well, ultimately just, she should have known better. The Commission took absolutely no prisoners and just said this is unacceptable. As a result, Trustee B ought to have been sufficiently diligent to the legal and regulatory framework in which the charity operated, including the identification and management of conflict of interest. It's a very nicely worded what the fuck. Silver lining, after working out a repayment plan with the interim managers, missing those dates, drama and all the things, the full amount was eventually repaid by Bianca to the charity in April 2023. Just to sketch out a little timeline of these events. 31st July 2018 and 31st July 2020, Ms. Tabinska is collecting those payments. June 15th, 2021, the commission asked for more information. Trustees say, no, it's fine. We all agreed in 2015 when all this was going down, and to support this claim, we hereby submit a letter. This letter is dated 27th January 2021. That submission was happening in August 2021. So the way I understand, they've signed it ex post, backdated it, and pretended it's all fine. And I swear I can just see them sitting and crossing their fingers and being like, no, it'll fly, it'll be good. And who do I mean when I say they signed the letter? The letter was signed by Trustee A, Naomi, to Trustee B, Bianca, authorizing Bianca's remuneration from the charity's fund. So this was against the charity's constitution document, against the law and guidelines, and this was just purely wrong. And Naomi authorized that with her own signature.
And I'm extremely concerned, and we are investigating on our side, as I was not in control of my charity.
Trustees A's action after the fact do not address her and the charity's other trustees' failings to comply with the charity's constitution and to act in compliance with their legal duties as trustees. This is all wrapped up with now the usual. The inquiry found the above failures to be evidence of mismanagement and or misconduct in the administration of the charity by the trustees. 2 points down, 2 more to go. So number 3, the governance and management of the charity by the trustees, including the failure to file statutory returns on time. This is sort of a too long didn't read version of the events. The inquiry found that there was significant poor governance within the charity's management and operation, including insufficient due diligence and monitoring for charity partners, lack of evidence involvement of all trustees in the administration of the charity, and lack of evidence regarding collective trustee decision-making. The inquiry found that the trustees failed to keep records to record their decision-making, this including invoices, receipts, partnership agreements, due diligence checks, and meeting minutes. I suppose government then does not approve of the pass notes and burn after reading system. Due to the trustees' poor record keeping, the inquiry was required to extensively use its information gathering powers to obtain information from third parties to better understand the decisions made by trustees. Because there were no notes, the commission had to go to extensive lengths, even get information on what the heck happened. Just to remind everyone, including Naomi Campbell, because I know she's watching, we're talking about what happened to almost £5 million sterling, bearing the almost 400,000 that went to actual charity organizations. Finding 4.5 million of money that people and companies donated over 5 years is not a small job, and it's not a job that should exist. The gravity of the consequences are far beyond good idea, bad execution. In my opinion, there were bad intentions. In the beginning of this video, I mentioned Civic Society's article saying the charity has repeatedly filed their accounts late. And here in this part of the inquiry, we learn details of this for admin. The inquiry states that accounts were filed late and mentions what exactly is it in violation of, with the commission late contrary to clause 24.1 of the charity's constitution and section 163 and 168 of the Act. Here's the submission data, and if you think, well, Linda, they did okay in 2017. It was only 6 days late on top of those 10 months that they had to file their accounts. Indeed, 6 days late to file £0 reported in income, expenditure, or other expenses. Even in a fiscal year where they were seemingly inactive, raised no funds, did no things, spent no money, they just could not be bothered to follow the law. And it's mentioned that 2021 were filed on time because they were uploaded directly by the commission, and 2022 also submitted on time by the appointed interim manager. Now, good people of the internet, imagine that you would pull this off on your government of choice. Authorities just stay on taxpayers and taxpayers' money like there's no tomorrow. Again, this is not just an oopsie. It is a criminal offence under Section 173 of the Act to fail to file a charity's annual accounts, annual returns, or trustee's annual report within the statutory 10-month deadline. The failure to file required documents on time is misconduct and or mismanagement by the trustees. It is the trustees' legal duty and responsibility to file charity's statutory returns on time in accordance with the Act and the Constitution. The trustees repeatedly failed to comply with this legal duty. The last point of the inquiry's findings, number 4, whether there have been misconduct and or mismanagement by those in control of the charity. With each section in those previous points, we'd get a little conclusion as to whether the inquiry finds that is misconduct. Here they follow up on that. As set out in previous sections of this report, the inquiry has made several findings of misconduct and or mismanagement in the administration of the charity by its trustees. Here the inquiry specifically elaborates on Fashion for Relief's failure to manage partnership arrangements. So Fashion for Relief held events to support 2 organizations. Save the Children and Mayor's Fund for London. Funnily enough, the inquiry mentions a one-off donation of £5,500 to the Italian branch of UNICEF on 13th August 2018. I'm not covering UNICEF in this video. I'm still waiting to see how it evolves, but if you have to cheat the system and you want to use an organization's name to sort of advance yourself and make yourself look better, do not fuck with UNICEF. They will come after you, and they did complain to the commission about Fashion for Relief. Anyway, these are sort of entangled, so I'll do my best to split it. Events held to support Save the Children were 2 fundraising galas in Cannes 2017 and we already talked about the one in 2018 earlier. According to their agreement, Fashion for Relief was supposed to submit to Save the Children a statement of income raised within 7 days. They didn't do that. It's then said that Fashion for Relief raised €450,000 in 2017, which is about £375,000. However, only £225,000 sterling was paid to Save the Children. The interim manager then managed to sort out the admin. And then finally, in January 2023, 4 and some years later, those funds was paid. So here the inquiry finds the trustees had not complied with the agreement that the charity entered into with Save the Children and failed to address a significant liability of the charity. This matter was only addressed because of the inquiry and the work of the interim manager. In support of Mayor's Fund for London, which is a charity that champions opportunities for young Londoners from low-income backgrounds, there was a charity event in the British Museum in September 2019 and a pop-up event at Westfield, London, which is a big shopping centre if you're unfamiliar with that, from 27th November to 8 December 2019, where Naomi Campbell sold her clothes in order to raise funds. Mayor's Fund for London received almost £100 sterling from that event held in the British Museum. And they also, just as Save the Children, complained to the commission regarding Fashion for Relief not meeting requirements of their arrangement. It said that they had no formal partnership, however, there was an informal partnership agreement. Turns out that failing to protect the charity's work and reputation through formalized partnership agreements is misconduct or mismanagement by trustees. It became the interim manager's job to then assess whether Mayor's Fund for London was a creditor and therefore entitled to receive those £50,000 that they were promised. Again, no record keeping about partnerships or relationship with charities. It made this very difficult, but here the commission says a charity's reputation is an asset and forms part of its property. This failure constitutes mismanagement in the charity's administration by the trustees.
I was not in control of my charity.
You serve as a trustee. You have legal obligation. The interim manager then concluded that they were not contractually obligated to pay the £50,000. However, finds there's a moral obligation to do so. I presume it was not only because Fashion for Relief pledged the amount to them. They used their name, their logos in promo materials and everything. They referred to them during the pop-up show, saying, oh, this is for a good cause. This goes to Mayor Funds for London. The interim manager then saw it through and arranged those £50,000 to be donated to Mayor's Fund for London. And I quote, which constituted the charity's remaining assets before the charity was dissolved. Kudos to that interim manager, to those two interim managers, honestly, because they would have just dissolved the charity and off we go. The official conclusions are, after all this reading, as expected. The commission concluded that there had been serious misconduct and or mismanagement in the administration of the charity by its trustees since it was established. The charity was poorly governed and managed, included management finances, the actual charity management, regular meetings, planning, record keeping, etc., and the mishandling of its funds. The trustees' lack of record keeping compounded these issues and required extensive use of the commission's information gathering powers to establish facts and obtain record relating to the charity to be able to reach the findings set out in this report. A regulatory action taken outlined all the steps the Commission took and was legally entitled to take and referred to specific legislation. There's an exhaustive write-up on the work that the appointed interim manager, Mrs. Turner and Mr. Watts, did. Great job, team. I mean, honestly, if you want to read how much work they did, you can do that in this section. It also outlines the costs. It was not £150,000. In total, it was £31,800 sterling from 8 March 2022 to 15 December 2023. And honestly, they didn't have it easy. They quite literally had to do everything themselves, even filed those yearly accounts. They managed to get back so much of the misplaced and misused funds and fulfill obligations that Naomi Campbell and her trustees just failed to do so. On 4th of April 2022, the trustees via their solicitor requested an internal review of the decision to appoint an interim manager of the charity. Now, don't get me wrong, they had every right to do so, but they fucking fought it. The absolute audacity. This review is then acted upon by an independent body to assess whether procedure had been followed. The reviewer concluded all was reasonable, proportionate, and lawful, aka you can sit back down. After all mess was sorted, the interim managers prepared a written resolution that the trustees signed, confirming that the charity should be dissolved and authorizing the interim manager to begin the dissolution process. The charity was dissolved and subsequently removed from the register by application on 15 March 2024. The inquiry recovered £344,736.15 sterling and protected further £98,000 sterling of the charity funds. Ultimately, the disqualification of those three musketeers. So what does the commission say? On 28th June 2023, they were given a formal notification of its intention to disqualify Naomi and Bianca. They both contracted lawyers. I'm not sure whether they contracted one solicitor to act on both their behalves or they had separate solicitors. However, they made written representations on 15th August in 2023. Bianca also made oral representation for herself on December 1st, 2023. Essentially, fighting why they should not be banned. These representations and other written evidence and representation provided were considered by an independent reviewer as part of the Commission's decision review procedure. The outcome of decision review on 17th April 2024 concluded that the disqualifications of Trustee A and B were lawful, reasonable, and proportionate, and the decision that represented the final decision of the Commission. On 28th May 2024, orders to disqualify Trustees A and B took effect. Trustee A, Naomi, was disqualified for a period of 5 years. Trustee B, Bianca, was disqualified for a period of 9 years. On 12 August 2024, an order to disqualify Trustee C, Ms. Veronica Chow, took effect. Trustee C was disqualified for a period of 4 years. In accordance with its obligation under Section 182 of the Act, the names of Trustees A, B, and C were entered onto the register of removed trustees.
Shame.
We made it to the end of findings, the issues for the wider sector. This basically just summarizes the gravity of this behavior, these actions, and just really ties it back to the charity law and legal obligations of trustees. It reinforces that personal benefit and conflict of interest has no place in the world of not-for-profit organizations, whether it's an individual or corporation. By the time I wrote this script, I was so upset that I could not write a reasonable end of this video, and I also wanted to wait because the video that you've now seen probably 5,000 times, Naomi Campbell says that she's going to instigate an independent or her investigation into what happened.
I've just found out today about the findings, and I'm extremely concerned, and we are investigating on our side. As I was not in control of my charity, I put the control in the hands of a legal lawyer, and so we are investigating to find out what and how, as everything I do and every penny I ever raise goes towards charities.
Now, it's a slight mystery as to what she wants to investigate, as there were no recorded meetings, no meeting minutes, or any other type of administrative work that went into this. And also, this has been now reported over a month ago, and I haven't really seen anything that's been said. But also, there's a lot more to this. I mean, the part with UNICEF, where you don't really fuck with UNICEF, so I'm just sort of seeing what's going to happen. On top of that, I believe that Naomi is just now trying to stay low because of all the involvement that she's got with her very good friend, Puffy. I don't want to go into that. It's not really part of the fashion corner, but it's certainly not helping her case whatsoever. And it's only just really reaffirming my thoughts about just like how rotted she is. This just really made me so upset. I don't care what's happening in your life. Do not steal from not-for-profit organizations. Do not steal for charities. Do not advocate and do not talk about underprivileged children that are starving, living in war-torn countries and trying to survive, and then go and misuse those funds. If that doesn't shame you and tear you from inside out, then I don't know what's going to help you. You might not even need therapy. You might need just purgatory. Anyway, I appreciate you staying with me through all this. I know this has been a long one and probably not very fashion related. Hopefully the next one will go back to more lighthearted topics, but I wanted to talk about it, so here I am. Thank you for listening. Thank you for putting up with me until the very end, and I'll see you in the next one.
I'm extremely concerned, and we are investigating on our side, as I was not in control of my charity.
Bye.